Hi everybody, thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn. I run the services at medcommsnetworking.com and the associated websites. So information, resources, services, activities, and so on for people who work in and around the global medcoms community, by which I'm talking people who work in and around medical communications, medical education, and medical publishing and the associated businesses. Importantly, we also do lots of activity, provide lots of information for people who want to know more about our business. So maybe you want to be a medical writer or an account manager, or editor or whatever, in which case go and have a look at firstmedcommsjob.com, where there's loads of information designed for people who are trying to understand our business a little bit better. We're doing lots of these webinars at the moment. I've been doing it for a long time, and we record them and we post them on NetworkPharma TV. If you want to go over there, you'll find nearly 500 videos now, many of which are based on webinars like this. So there's lots of useful content to go and have a look at if you've not seen it before. Okay, so what we're doing today, we've got a webinar. We've got the guys from HCG, and we're going to be talking about the social strategy, I guess. I'll let you explain that and quite what we're talking about in your introduction. So I'm going to hand over to Danielle to kick us off. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Peter. So I'm going to share screen and then talk a little bit about who we are. So just to open, we're going to talk to you today about looking about how we build a roadmap for a successful social strategy. And just as a little bit of an opening to tell you a bit about who we are as an agency group. We are part of a group of agencies called Healthcare Consultancy Group, and there are 7 of us in this network. We're part of Omnicom. 2 of the agencies are represented here today. So we've got Chameleon and Synergy. We're both of us are based in the UK. HCG is also supported by digital and creative strategists who we call the Healthcare Consultancy Group Engagement Group, who we call our engagement group, and work very closely with them across all of our pharma clients. We are 2 agencies in terms of Chameleon and Synergy, work with both similar and very different clients. So this gives us a really great variety across all the projects that we work on. That's a little bit about us as a network and as a group of agencies, and then I'm going to introduce myself. So I am Danielle James, and I work as a managing director at Chameleon. And just in terms of social, I'm very involved with leading the social strategy for Chameleon as an agency, and I use all of the insights that I get in terms of how we do that, share that with our clients, and so that helps show our clients that we're out there, and also then apply that to the principles and the projects that we're doing with our clients. And now, Lisa.
Hi, nice to see everyone here today. My name's Luke Molloy. So I'm a director and the innovation lead at Synergy. I've been in the business for over 20 years, and the last 2 to 3 years of which has seen an increasing focus on helping clients to wrap their head around social and how to best leverage that. And really looking forward particularly to the end of this presentation, where we can have some discussion and talk about that and answer any questions. And I'll hand over to Dimithri.
Oh, thanks, Luke. Hi, everyone. I'm Dimithri. At HCG, I lead the digital strategy team. And as a communication strategist, I've worked on social as a content creator in strategic roles, in-house as a head of social media. And over the last kind of 10 years, I've seen how social has really transformed the communications landscape. And when we think of that strategy of, how business objectives tie into the target audience and our content, and then especially channels, it's a really interesting time to kind of be working on this type of stuff. So I'll pass back to Danielle now to get us started.
Brilliant. Thank you, Luke and Dimithri. So just, I think it would be remiss of us not to talk about transformation and how we are in terms of new technology, new digital landscape. We're really excited by what's happening within this, within the sort of transformation and within that landscape. And, we all are innovators. We all want to know what's coming next and how we can take our clients on our journey with us. We have to, obviously, as an agency group, remain competitive in this changing landscape. So we look at strategies that we can use to change what we're doing with our clients and for our clients. So we stay on top of the latest digital trends. Luke's going to talk a little bit about how we go through doing that. Many of our clients are asking us and talking to us about multi-channels. The next multi-channel is omnichannel, what's going on in there. And of course, we couldn't not talk about ChatGPT and where that fits. That's not the focus of the talk today, but that's definitely out there, and we need to sort of think about that when we're talking to our clients. The main things that I guess we're focusing on today is around social, and just with our clients, there's hurdles that we go through and sort of what that looks like and how we address those barriers with our clients. So we know that our clients want to do digital and they want to be involved in a digital strategy, they want to be involved in a social strategy, but they're not sure about kind of what their vision is. They might have a corporate vision, but the brand vision is very different. So we look at what we might be able to do to address that, how we're going to benchmark them for success. Some of the other barriers that we go through would be something like pharma companies, they tend to work in silos. So we work out how we're going to break down those silos, and definitely we're doing it as agency groups. So how do we get our clients to do that? We all know that pharma are quite risk averse. So how do we overcome that barrier? What does that look like? What does uncertainty in delivery look like? And how do we address that? And then, I guess lastly, it's just about figuring out for us as an agency group what that process is to deliver something new to our clients. So we'll talk a little bit about that through the talk today. I'm going to hand over to Luke.
So as Danielle said, there's a lot of challenges and barriers to innovation. Doing anything new can be difficult, and there is a real skills gap across pharma when it comes to social strategy and doing it well. At HCG, we're luckily built for innovation and well placed to help our clients tackle social. So our specialist expertise includes approximately 150 digital strategists like Dimithri, as well as creatives. And I think more importantly, we have a really strong culture and framework for innovation. So we believe innovation is the responsibility of everyone, and that innovation is actually part of everyone's core competencies. So we have various ways we achieve this. So we have established forums both within our individual agencies and across the group, where teams showcase innovation, share insights, establish best practices and learnings from all the work we do across, as Danielle pointed out, our very broad client base. One of those forums that I'm glad to be a part of is a group known as the Innovation Catalysts. This group always has various work streams on the go where we do things like pilot the use of new channels so we can better understand their strengths and limitations and impact, and that allows us to better enables us to advise clients. So, before we start selling these solutions to clients, it's really important that we actually test and try these out ourselves. And that's just within our Healthcare Consultancy Group. We're also able to tap into that power and expertise of our wider Omnicom Health Group. So if you're not familiar with Omnicom Health Group, it's one of the most networked healthcare networks there is. There's more than a dozen companies and over 4,000 talented people specializing in every area of health. And one of my favorite forums for innovation is called Digital Fusion. Every month in this forum, we invite a different industry guest along to our agency to showcase their latest product innovations. So in the past year, some of those guests have included Reddit, TikTok, Twitter, Snapchat, Microsoft, Meta, LinkedIn, as well as many others. So you get the idea. And these sessions are really insightful. They help us to understand the nuances of these different products, help us to understand any things like generational differences or the specific audiences that they reach. So for example, which ones are oncologists using, like Twitter or Reddit, versus what, say, cardiologists might be more likely to use, such as LinkedIn. And so all these different forums that we have created to try and share and learnings really helps us to stay on top of like these emerging opportunities in social. But how do we actually make it happen? If we go to the next slide, like all good work, it takes a team effort. So if I start maybe with client services, the role of client services is to present and advise clients on how we solve their challenges. So in terms of social strategy, that might be, they need to be able to communicate the rationale for adopting a social strategy and also the value of that solution. Once we have a client on board, they need to then obviously estimate budgets, establish a process, a schedule, and most importantly, rally the team. The digital strategist, they're critical in shaping the approach, helping to navigate us across the process from gathering audience insights, social listening, through to customer segmentation, helping us to define which channels and which formats we're going to use that are going to yield the biggest impact. The medical writer helps us to identify the strategic content themes and applies scientific rigor to all the copy and content, making sure it's accurate, and also ensuring that all the medical legal review processes are adhered to. And last but not least, the creative team, super important. They ensure that we bring the science to life in a visual and compelling way. If we go to the next slide, I'm going to hand over to Dimithri, who's going to talk to us more about digital strategy.
So thanks, Luke. So we know social's a busy place of, competitors, news, cat videos, and all of this contributes to those HCPs have with information overload and being really time limited. So when we think about our content and communications, content has to be not only factual, but interesting and in engaging formats, really simplified and efficient. It needs to be visual and eye-catching. So all those roles that Luke talked about earlier are really key in making great content. And it has to be suited to the digital distracted age and go to the channels that that these HCPs are using. And when we think about those challenges alongside, social's place in the communications landscape, it's very much the intersection of so many things. It's one channel for updates, Congress information, where they go for data, peer networking, and also to hear that expert voice. Social media is, word of mouth at scale, and we have to think of it as an ongoing conversation. And, amongst all of this, a kind of mistake brands often make is believe we do everything on our own. The conversation is going to be happening with or without your brand. And if we jump to the next slide, that always stands out for me is 92% of HCPs peer content is more credible. So for a social strategy to work, we have to work with the people that are driving these conversations, co-create content with them and really collaborate with them, just like we do with our agency team or our client. We have to find and work with the scientifically credible voices on the platform, and they will talk to an audience that turns to them, and their influence will really cut through a lot of that noise. And also they're talking to an audience they belong to. So digital opinion leaders are a trusted voice. They're leaders, and they're a real shortcut to information for many HCPs. So finding them, collaborating, and is a key part of a social strategy. And social is not a broadcast medium like so many other digital strategies. It's very much audience and content focused. So what would content look like? And on the next slide, we've got an example here of a Twitter thread or a tweetorial. So it's a series of tweets that in this case allowed a dear well to tell a story and build a narrative uninterrupted on Twitter, whilst it also gives an opportunity for organic conversations and discussions with their followers through the comments. And in this this example, it was 11 pre-approved tweets that we wrote with an HCP. The medical writer worked with them to find, or rather the client and accounts were having a discussion that led to an ad board that then led to us having a conversation with a HCP there to find out topics that they wanted to educate their audience about. So when we ended up making the content, it was insightful, it was from a trusted source, and the reach had really brilliant results. It got retweets and it got to the right target audience because it really brought brought together those people and, you know, what needed to be expressed in terms of data, and, you know, the level was just right. So understanding the audience, what they like, the content formats and the channels is really key to your social strategy. You know, other things that we've done are used Twitter live stream for launches. We've used LinkedIn groups to gather people together and run webinar type content. And, you know, if there's one thing you can take from this is, you know, really use the capabilities of the channels, and, you know, find out what HCPs really like. And on the next slide, you know, we've talked about insight and data, and that really kind of fueled the content we made for this campaign aimed at identifying at-risk patients in COVID. You know, it was really critical in this situation because we found ourselves communicating in the usual information overloaded, time-starved environment, but for a brand and a disease that was polarizing, you know, politicized, and had a ton of misinformation around it, meaning we had to think, you know, differently, and we had to differentiate. So, you know, one of the things, and, you know, when Luke is kind of talking about this, you know, one of the things I think about with innovation, a key piece is, you know, being adaptable. And, you know, those mixing of skill sets that we talked about earlier was very much fundamental to this. We brought together, you know, medical, digital and creative to build an impactful, interesting, targeted educational campaign. And because of most of the conversation around COVID was on social and not driven by brands, we had to deliver it via trusted DOLs, you know, the people who they turn to for information. You know, as you can see, it took the shape of tweets, infographics and videos shared in this case by Dr. Gibson, who's got over 100,000 followers, and he was talking about the target patient anyway. So it kind of fit in contextually with what he was doing as well. But, you know, we knew in this campaign, with the social landscape so fragmented, we needed to go across different platforms to reach the audience. So we created bespoke content for Instagram. And, you know, this partnership again came about with a conversation that we had in an ad board. So if you jump to the next slide, please, DJ, with a doctor here called Dr. Rutland. And, you know, long before Elon started flying Twitter into the sun, our research showed, you know, our audience was on Instagram. And the good thing about this particular HCP was he had a really interesting and engaging way of talking to HCPs and also patients. So reaching the market by co-creating content with him and having him tell the story for us, you know, again, telling the story to an audience he belonged to really made a difference. It, you know, it challenged those perceptions that were around this. It, you know, removes some of the barriers to reaching HCPs. So lastly, you know, when we think about our roadmap on the next slide, you know, if we, you know, with any communications, you've got to think about your goals and objectives. You know, who is your target audience? You know, what do they like? Where do they go? And then, you know, identify those opportunities and gaps where you can try something different. And, you know, in this case, that's where social can really do a lot of interesting things. And once you've identified those gaps and opportunities, it's all about, you know, content, and it's about testing and trying things. If it works, do more of it, but always make it measurable. And, you know, part of that ongoing journey, you know, cumulative touch points leading to more. You know, in this case, it's an educational journey. You're building up an understanding, and, you know, lastly, don't forget to kind of have fun with it, you know, be creative. You know, as said, you're competing for attention, not just with MedComms and other types of things, but with entertainment that is on there. So, you know, to stand out, you have to collaborate, you've got to innovate and create interesting and engaging ways of talking to HCPs. And that's one of the reasons why I like social so much, because you can do all of that.
Just to jump in already with the kind of comment, something I found quite interesting is, you know, social itself isn't new, but, you know, since COVID and this huge focus across our clients with digital transformation, they're more understanding the importance that they get on board with this now. So this is kind of why it's become more and more relevant, and it's become, our clients are becoming more open to the fact that they need to do this and more willing to experiment. And it's quite interesting, you know, it's not always a quick fix. Like some of our clients, you know, some of my clients, it's been taken years to get them on board and get them prepared to go on this journey. So some of this and some of that work Dimitri's shared, you know, it's the result of a longer process of explaining to clients, bringing them on board on the journey, helping them to understand, helping them to navigate the compliance and those kind of issues as well. So it's not like these ideas just happen overnight. Often it's the result of a lot of different touch points, a lot of conversation. And I've had the pleasure of like working with Dimithri to guide clients through that journey. And the other thing is, you know, it's this pockets of experience that different clients have when they do one thing, but there's so many channels, there's so many nuances. And one thing that we're doing with a lot of clients is helping them to decide and pilot. So I think, you know, what was nice about those cases was it was piloting different channels and different audiences and measuring the impact. And that's really important. So definitely, I think a lot of our clients are still in this testing phase where it's like, let's pilot something, let's try something on Instagram, let's try something on Twitter, let's try something on LinkedIn. And they're piloting and they're measuring. So that whole measurement aspect's really important and will help decide, you know, continued investment in what they do next. So I think we want to open it up to questions from people. So you can see there's one already in the channel. We need better comms materials for non-clinical stakeholders. This is going to be quite important going forward. How can we do this well using digital and education work? Does anyone want to answer that? I mean, first of all, I mean, yes, you're completely right. I'd agree. Our main business, you know, is largely around HCP education and HCP materials, but we do branch out into like patient materials here and there. But this is definitely something to be tackled with across the board and with those clients. Dimithri, Danielle, I don't know if you have a...
I would say the same principle applies, and it's about co-creation. That Dimithri talked really nicely about it with the Instagram post that we did. Co-creation is the I guess the kind of foundation for where you want to be in terms of the content that you're sharing, right, Dimithri?
Yeah, and you know, so Google is getting worried about TikTok because people are going to TikTok and using it as their search. So Google right now is saying, don't worry about SEO quite as much, focus on user-generated content, because in theory, when you go to, you use search, you don't want to see a brand page. You want to actually know what the experience is like. So if that's a drug or something along those lines, I think user-generated, you know, peer content, whether that's a patient or an HCP, is becoming and is evidently more and more important. I think the only other aspect to it is you have HCPs congregate on certain types of platforms, but patients right now are embracing the newer ones, and we're seeing, you know, TikTok is primarily an HCP to patient platform. You know, it doesn't lend itself well to sharing data in quite the same way, but it will happen because that's what people are using. You know, they've added functionality around images and slideshows that, you know, make it seem a bit more like Instagram, whereas Instagram was trying to do all the reels and adopt what TikTok was using. So I think it's going to balance out, but, you know, if you're, depending on who you're going for, think about which platforms you need, and then, you know, just use that mix and just try and test things really. It may resonate, it may not, but you'll get the metrics that allow you to see that and build off it.
Guys, can I just jump in? Sorry, if we're into the Q&A now, can we just lose the slide, Danielle? And
yeah, of course.
And just we've got a good quarter hour or so to chat. Can I just bring you back a little bit and ask the stupid questions, because that's my role. You talk social, everyone talks social, And and we're touching on a number of different sorts of social channels, but everyone talks social like it's a bit like it's one thing, whereas those channels are all very, very different that you started talking about. I just wondered whether we could tease that out a little bit more. You know, what are you talking about as the main, let's say the main channels anyway? What does the client think when they're asking you to do a social campaign versus what you are? And how do you, and you said, I think several times, you know, it's about finding your audience and going there, but how do you work out where your particular audience is? I mean, my experience of most groups of people is they're spread across a number of different channels, and it's quite difficult to go, well, we'll just choose that one channel, that one, but they're so different that that can bring in complexity. So sorry, there's a few questions in there. I just wanted us to be a little bit clearer as to what we're talking about, rather than just go social, we deal with it like that. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, totally understand. And I'll take that one first, the triple decker of questions. So the main channels for HCPs, it's evolving, but right now we see in terms of open channels, so the channels anyone can go on where you don't need a MPI number, such as Sermo and Doximity, where those are closed networks. I think Sermo has, I think, nearly 2 million HCPs on there, but you know, it's smaller. They, you know, you can't access it in the same way. But the main channels are Twitter, Instagram, and then, you know, LinkedIn, but they each serve a different purpose. So Twitter is, you can see it in the way conferences have adopted it. So always use ASCO as your kind of benchmark of where things are going. So ASCO adopted Twitter very early on. They use it for updates and, you know, for conferences and keeping up on that news. It's a key channel there. Then you look at the DOLs and where they have their biggest audiences. You know, some of them run into 100,000 plus on Twitter, but on Instagram, they also have those. Now, if those are the main channels, it then starts to vary by specialism. Like dermatologists will use a more visual platform like Instagram. You know, oncology, cardiology, massive on Twitter. There's journal groups on there, and there's kind of different user cases for the different channels. So, and then to jump to your kind of third question, how do you go about, you know, deciding on which one and finding those? The good thing is there's social listening tools. So you can look for conversations, topics, themes, and what's being discussed on these various different channels. And then you can identify the people and think, right, there's a big oncology community here. I'm going to tap into that. Or maybe I need a niche one. Where are they? Oh, look, they're on Instagram. With just one last point on that, in terms of LinkedIn, you have a very big audience on there, but are they using it for the same type of reason as a Twitter? Yes, they may be on there, but how frequently are they on there? So that's one thing that you always have to factor in. But, you know, LinkedIn has the most kind of physician level data, as it were. You'll know their job title, you'll know where they are. So if you're going to do like an email campaign or something like that, it's a good one through there. And then for your second question about what are clients expecting, you've got, you can split that in terms of the social channels and all their nuances. There's organic campaigns. What can they put out on their own channels in terms of content? But then nowadays we think of content and then what are the drivers? You know, how are we actually going to get attention on our video or, you know, our infographic? And we have to use pay for social, so targeted ads. And that's a big part of where, you know, our clients' work is going. Not only creating the content that will be suited to the social, but also how do you drive to it? So hopefully that answered most of it. But
I think it covers, there's lots and lots of questions underneath that. I just think if nothing else, it's important that people understand that they need to think about this stuff. Danielle, you were going to say something. I cut across you.
I guess there's also a difference between what we would call branded and unbranded. Like what I guess in a way, most of what we're talking about is unbranded. And it's not related to a product, it's disease awareness, it's completely kept separate to what you would call, like, you know, we don't communicate on an actual product when we're going on to social. We communicate about above brand and above, like, and talk about a disease.
Okay, which raises sorry, Luke, go on, sorry.
I was just going to say, and there's obviously, we hear from the channels, they tell us what the audience is, they give us these numbers and breakdowns, but I think what Dimithri also spoke to is, the important first step for any client tends to be, we start with the social listening to understand who is saying what are the conversations. And then also with most of the first step we often take with clients is actually having some advisory boards or consultancy calls where we actually talk to the customers, that we talk to the doctors and understand how are they using it? Is this the right channel? Because, and I think the COVID's an interesting one, it's a very diverse set of stakeholders we're trying to communicate to. And each of those stakeholders is coming to those platforms for a different reason and engaging with it in a different way. Therefore, the content has to be changed and different to be relevant to them. So it's very layered, but it's very important, I think, that we get the insight straight from the horse's mouth, that we need to actually talk to customers and understand what they want. And that's a critical first step before we go away and actually just do something blind. Like everything we do has to have that strong rationale and pull through.
Okay, so where I was going to go, and we're getting quite a lot of questions on this, so we're going to get into this a little bit. The social media guidance from PMCPA end of January. So you haven't mentioned it yet. So first question, from your point of view, it's interesting what Danielle said, because she was drawing a distinction between promotional and a branded type work, which might simplify your answer, but let's just see where we go with this one, okay? The PMCPA social media guidance was launched, off the top of my head, it was something like 26th, 27th of January. A lot of us have been waiting a long time for that. It probably is fair to say it wrote down on paper some of the stuff that we all thought, well, that was the case anyway, but writing it down can in itself cause some problems. But there were but there was quite a lot of discussion around that document. So talk a little bit about that. How's it, you can see the sort of questions coming in. How's it impacting what you're doing? How are you taking it into account? How are the clients dealing with it? What are the key issues from your point of view, whatever it is, 3-4 weeks into those new guidelines coming out? Can you talk a bit around that? Who can take that? Luke looks like he's going.
I'm happy to start a discussion on that. So there's a lot of guidance out there. We work across various different markets. So we've got a lot of experience globally in the US and the UK. And there's a lot of compliance. And for a lot of clients, this is scary. A lot of them get burnt and make breaches, and there's a lot of fear, and it causes a lot of, to be honest, this helps fuel the kind of like fear from clients and that risk aversion, that they don't want to do it or they're worried about that. And so it's our duty to, and I think in one of your earlier webinars, Jane Packham talked about this, it's around having this culture of compliance, and we have to stay plugged into what's happening, what is the guidance, what's happening in the UK. We have the compliance hub. We talk to them every month to understand what are the recent breaches, what's going on, to understand that compliance, so we know about it, so we can advise our clients. But I'd say with any project, it doesn't really change our approach, because anytime we go to do social, we need to establish what is that medical legal review? What can we not do? How do we appropriately add disclaimers? And that's kind of like got to be built into the process of how you establish this. Dimithri, I don't know if you want to.
No, exactly the same. It's someone put in the chat about how do you minimize the risk. And for a lot of companies, it's by bringing in an expert or bringing in an agency that does minimize that risk, because, you've taken it out of the company in a sense. But we know the guidelines, not only the ABPI ones, but the platforms themselves. Meta has certain guidelines around healthcare promotion and so forth. We know the clients' guidelines, because often we'll be working with a brand team, but their corporate guidelines are in place to help work within those. But as Luke said, one of the key stages is you learn from listening, but then the next stage, as you go through it, you start to define those guardrails, what it is that you can and can't do, what your client is comfortable with, where they are on that digital maturity process. Is it going to be a pilot? Is it going to be, just a test or something small that you can then lead to something else? So, it is very much, a collaboration, not only with the creative and medical and so forth, but also with legal and regulatory. A big part of what we did on that COVID example is the RC decks, where we go in and we say, look, this is what we're trying to do. Is there any problems? Can we say this? Can we do it in this way? Where does the kind of PI information, where can that sit? And then, building mock-ups of all of that. So it's very rigorous, but, in fair, I still think it's overstated. You're not trying to do anything on social that you wouldn't do in person, or that you not be able to, you're not trying to get away with things on social that you wouldn't do elsewhere. So I think it gets a bit overstated, but I'm glad the ABPI has kind of put it in writing, because it gives us something to refer back to, because it was always a little bit just follow the same rules, but then people, needed something to be able to look at.
It's a little bit different though, isn't it? Because, and certainly the way, again, so much depends on quite what you mean by what you're talking about. Because when someone here has put it on social, the assumption is everyone can see everything. And that does raise questions, doesn't it? Well, Danielle, I was going to pin you down a little bit if I could pursue something you said on this, but pursuing a particular angle. You said, I think I'm right in saying that you said you were responsible for the social strategy for Chameleon as a company. Is that right? And you were saying we use those learnings, etc. So I get that. One of the things that the new PMCPA guidance made very clear, although I think it was probably already clear in most of our minds, is the accountability that goes all the way down the chain. So, pharma company is ultimately going to get into trouble if anybody does something wrong all the way down the line. If you as an agency, or if one of your suppliers or your freelancers or whatever does something, and some of that can be completely inadvertent. Hey, mum, look, I've just been working on this project about drug X or something, and you can be in trouble. I just wondered whether you could spend just for a couple of minutes, because I think this is an interesting aspect which often doesn't get talked about, is from your company point of view, what do you put in place, and how do you manage those policies? How do you make sure that everyone in your own company knows what they're doing, but also, for instance, your suppliers, because the chain, it can be quite long. You know what I'm trying to say? So just talk around that side of things, because that is important.
From a corporate communication, and just making sure that as a company network, we've got what you would call a SOP, people kind of, this is what you can do and what you can't do on digital, and on any social platform. People are aware of what is company content, but also, and then what is individual content. So making sure that, whatever we post as a company, it goes back to that kind of above brand. Like, we're just talking about the brand that is Chameleon. At no point do we ever have a conversation on any of the platforms around a product, or a like promoting anything that is outside of that. So we've kind of got, our rules are everybody, the platforms that people have are their own, but actually if they're putting content about the company on there, then that comes back to us. So it would sit with we've got a social strategy group within each of the agencies that approves the content that's going out directly, and then anything of that content then comes back to the company. But then individuals are allowed to post content. What we say to individuals is, if you're going to a congress, it's best not to say, I'm at this congress with this client, because we have our MSAs with our clients don't allow us to promote the fact that we're working with those clients. So, that's the level of where we are as a company, and the individual level. So we go by what our MSA is with our clients as to whether we're allowed to share that content and where we are with it.
As I say, one of the things is it can be very inadvertent, can't it? And do you tell your freelancers, your, I don't know, other third-party contractor types, of whom you must have a number, that this has to be taken very seriously? Because the sort of stories that get bandied around is the actor in the video that was done a year ago through a production company, has put it up on YouTube or something and gone, look what I've done, sort of thing. And there are cases where that's been found at risk. So as I say, I'm just intrigued. If I come and work with you as some sort of consultant or freelancer, do I get handed a very clear social type strategy document and put through some training or something? Or I'm not trying to put you on the spot particularly. I'm just trying to get a sense of, because that is a very important part of that document that came out a few weeks ago, is emphasizing that you've got to be very careful with your personal accounts. Are we just going to agree on that one? I don't think I'm going to get very far on this one, am I?
No,
I'm just intrigued how it
I
works
think
in
you're
practice.
right. I think that, you know, that there is a push for us to make sure that what we're saying as a company and individuals, what they're saying that references back to us as a company is people are aware of the implications of the impact of anything that they say as an individual in relation to us as a company. Yeah, that you know, you wouldn't, if you were working within a pharma company, it would not be tolerated for you to go and promote a drug as an individual. It would be referenced back to the company. So the same applies for an agency. It's not our place to, as an individual, it's not our place to promote the product. And you know, that's quite clear in the guidelines for us as a company. Yeah.
Okay. And come back to the whole thing about digital opinion leaders. How do you define a digital opinion leader?
It varies actually. So in theory, they're basically like a key opinion leader, but on social. So it kind of comes down to two aspects. Do they have the scientific credibility, you know, their credentials, and then do they have the social, i.e. the reach and engagement with their audience? So, you know, for me, a digital opinion leader is an excellent communicator, or in this case, an excellent medical communicator with an influence on the platform and the audience that to go with that. Does that answer your question?
Well, I was just wondering whether you could be a bit more specific than that. I mean, maybe you can't, but you know, I could imagine someone sitting there and going, well, how many followers does Dr. X need to be on what platform? Or, you know, I just wondered whether there's any sense of that, or whether that's a completely stupid question.
So it can vary, and it depends in which sector you are. So like often with rare diseases, the influencers the communities can be quite small. So the influencers may only have hundreds of followers. But then at the same time, if you've got 100,000 followers on a platform, you know, that audience, is it going to just be cardiologists, or is it just going to be nephrologists? Most likely not. And therefore you might have transcended your specialism. So depending on what story or what content you're trying to create and share, you might want to choose what typically would have been micro influencers, you know, for that couple of hundred to a couple of thousand. Nowadays, post-COVID, you know, our micro influencers are, you know, sometimes in the kind of, you know, close to 10,000, whereas before they used to be sometimes in the hundreds. But if you think about someone who can hold an audience of, you know, if you said, oh, I've got something to communicate and this HCP can guarantee me 100 nephrologists, that would have been a great result. Now it's, you know, kind of scaled up. But I think it really comes down to who you're trying to target. You're going to do analysis on that digital opinion leaders' influence. There's scoring for that. There's tools that help us do that. What topics are they talking about? You know, you build that criteria based on, you know, client needs or your communication needs, and you know, and it will vary. Sometimes you want people that are, you know, based in the community and, you know, are really clinically led. Sometimes you want people that can just amplify and spread the news to as wide a national audience as possible. So it will really come down to your campaign and what your objectives are.
And just to build on that, when this whole DOL identification piece, you know, which we do at the start of the project, you take your channel, say it's Twitter, you identify who are the oncologists that have the biggest audience or followers, but then you need to look in terms of, but who are their followers? Are their followers patients, or are their followers other HCPs? And that's often like a critical step to what Dimithri was saying. It's like, is this the right person? Who's actually following them? Is that the people we want to communicate to? So the whole identification piece involves quite a lot of spreadsheets, crunching kind of numbers, looking at them, looking at how they actually engage on the platform. And it's kind of like the first step in the process, isn't it? Alongside the listening.
Okay.
Definitely.
All right, probably should wrap up there. Daniel, have you got a final comment? I don't know, looking through your crystal ball and you know, is this just going to get more and more important for us as an industry? We just have to, am I just stating the obvious? Have you got any comment on where this is all going, just to finish us off?
Happy to go. I mean, I think with
All right,
omnichannel
Luke.
and, you know, like it's going to continue. Platforms are changing all the time. TikTok, all these new platforms continue to evolve and emerge, and it's important that we're sending the messages to the people where they are and the platforms that they're using. So it's going to become important. And this rise of omnichannel and, you know, need to get messages across, it's going to become more complicated maybe, but it's going to be important. But I'll hand to DJ or Dimithri.
I would say exactly the same. Like, it's not going anywhere, and we need to work out how we engage on those platforms, because that's where most of everyone is that we want to talk to and we want to have conversations with, and our clients will take that risk eventually in terms of them being there as well. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think
Dimithri, do you want to go the final word then? Go on.
Yeah, maybe. I think it's established now. The people that aren't, you know, on there are going to, you know, start to feel the effects. They're going to be left behind. You know, most of our clients are trying to use it in one way or another. There was a question that came in about, you know, do people pay for social listening? And the answer is yes, because not only does it tell you about the audience and that voice of customer, but you can use it in a number of different ways, from competitor analysis to, you know, content creation ideas. Social, you know, like we said, is a broad umbrella, but it has value in so many different ways. You know, if you're not on there communicating and using it as a channel, you're probably missing out, but you can still learn from it in a number of different ways and use it. So I think it's established now. I'm sure, you know, none of us sort of forecast what Elon and his effect was, but it's kind of too big to fail in a sense. You know, people have left, but when you've got 20,000 followers on there, you're not going to jump ship unless something really catastrophic happens. So I think in a way, you know, they're here to stay. Some new ones will come along, they'll change. But yeah, it's just communications on a different channel.
Okay. Let's draw the line there, guys. Thank you very much. There's lots of food for thought there. So thank you very much. And thank you to the audience for joining in and all your comments and questions. And if we haven't covered them off, we're going to be here for a few minutes yet, so we can still keep going. So don't all rush away. But thank you, guys. I know I can speak for you and say that you're very happy for people to contact you via LinkedIn. I mean, part of the point of these webinars is encouraging people to make connections. So I'd encourage anyone watching this to reach out to you. So thank you very much. If I can help anybody, then please contact me. MedComsNetworking.com will tell you what I'm up to. But I wish you all a good day. And I'm going to ask the panelists to give us a quick wave and we'll stop the recording. So bye-bye, everyone. Bye.